Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming. We've got a presentation to give you on the Queensway Terrace Storm Sewer Rehabilitation Project. I'm Teresa. This is Teresa Kavanagh, your councillor. I'm going to pass it over to Kevin Gibbs, who is managing the project, and he's going to do the presentation. We also have with us Phil Laundrie, who's manager for traffic services for the city, so we can ask questions to him about traffic related issues. Okay, so we'll just get started with the presentation. Thank you very much, Kevin, and you can introduce other members of your team.
Okay, thank you.
Just to let people know, we will be recording this meeting, right, Connie? Yeah,
yes, we will. Yeah.
Yes, we will be recording this meeting. So in case anyone couldn't make it, they'll have the information. So, all right, I'll hand it over to Kevin now. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our project presentation. Very grateful to be here, and I'm the new project manager. We had our previous project manager has taken maternity leave, and we wish her all the well for her new daughter. And I want to introduce Luke Marino, the program manager for this project. Historically, he's seen the beginning of it 4 years ago when we started this project. So Luke, if you want, you can take the mic.
Yes, hi everybody. Luke Marino here with the city. So working with Kevin and our team here to deliver this project. So thanks for obviously taking the time for being here today and getting an update, and thanks for reaching out. So we should really appreciate the opportunity to showcase and inform you on what's coming down the pipe on your neighborhood for this project. So obviously, Kevin, as you heard, Kevin is your project manager for this job, and it will be your one guy, the guy to reach to contact during this undertaking for the questions, comments, concerns. So and surely Kevin's been around for a while. He knows the ins and outs, so we surely can work with you and support you and help you with any means we can during construction. So we also have Jason from our firm, your design firm, GLR, a well-known solid firm with good reputation, obviously, in town. So they've been their design consultants that's been working for us.
Luke,
Complex.
sorry to interrupt you, Luke, but we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. If you could get closer to the mic.
Oh, I'll get a bit closer. There you go.
Thank you so much.
So I'll leave. So maybe I'll let Jason to give a quick intro on his background. Jason.
Yep. So yeah, thanks everyone. My name is Jason Bette. I'm a senior civil engineer with JL Richards and Associates. We're an engineering design firm in the city of Ottawa. We were retained by the city to complete the design work for the project, as well as help administer the construction contract. So I'm going to lead you through a presentation that'll give you a little bit of an update on the project, status, some timelines, what some things you can kind of expect with the upcoming construction. And so if everyone's okay, I'm just going to kind of launch into the presentation. So I'm just going to go back. Like, we did have a previous public information session back in November of 2019, but not everyone may have attended. And again, it was a little while ago, so we'll just kind of refresh people's memories on kind of what the project is and what we're going to be doing. So this map right here basically highlights the project limits for this project. So we're going to be working on Henley between Connaught and Alpine, a short section of Arkell, the north section of Arkell, Alpine Avenue from Henley to Clarinda, a short section of Clarinda between Alpine and Mossdale, Mossdale between Clarinda and Moncton, and then a section of Moncton Road from Mossdale to just west of would be the east leg of Gold Crescent. And then we're also going to be working within an existing easement that runs between Moncton Road and Queensview Drive. So essentially, I'll give you a quick overview of what type of work we're going to be doing. You know, and then some of these points I'll elaborate a little bit further on in the presentation. So essentially what's driving the project is having to replace an aging trunk storm sewer that runs through the neighborhood on Moncton, Mossdale, Clarinda, Alpine, and Henley Street. We're going to be realigning a section of trunk storm sewer and trunk sanitary sewer along a portion of Alpine and Henley Street. We're going to be replacing the local trunk storm sewer and sanitary sewers at the north end of Arkell with new local sewers. We're going to be abandoning a section of existing trunk storm and sanitary sewers within an easement that runs between Alpine and Arkell. We'll have to, as part of the work, we're going to have to replace select sections of sanitary sewer and some water mains, as well as some house service laterals that are just going to be impacted by the trunk storm sewer replacement. We'll be reinstating roadways, grass boulevards, any landscaping that's been impacted by the underground work. There'll be utility relocations, which actually many of that has already taken place. I think people have probably noticed that there was some gas relocation work that took place on Moncton, Mossdale this past fall, as well as on Alpine. So most of the advanced utility relocations have already taken place. And then lastly, there'll be some fairly extensive tree planting that'll be compensating for any existing trees that have to be removed to accommodate the trunk storm sewer installation. So one, I guess, new component to the project, and this is different than from the previous public information session, is that the scope of work has been expanded to include construction of a new sidewalk along the north side of Henley. So that'll extend all the way from Connaught to Alpine. And then at the northeast corner of Alpine and Henley, Alpine will be narrowed slightly, or what they call a bulb out. And I guess the idea there is to help a little bit with, or to act as a bit of a traffic calming feature kind of along that steep section of hill. So that's a new scope that was added to the project. So maybe just stepping back a little bit, just give you a quick little rundown, like what's driving this project? Why is it important? So what people may not realize is that through the Queensway Terrace North neighborhood, there's a large trunk storm sewer that runs underneath the roadway, and it drains a very large tributary area, and this outline here gives you an idea of just the extent of the drainage area that is served by that trunk storm sewer. So it extends well south of the Queensway all the way up to the baseline. So this critical piece of infrastructure is in poor condition and needs to be proactively replaced within the current project limits. So there is a trunk sanitary sewer that runs parallel to the same trunk storm sewer we're replacing. However, it's in good shape and not in need of replacement. And again, since we're replacing the existing trunk storm sewer with a new pipe, the city is taking the opportunity to improve the overall hydraulic performance of the system by installing a larger pipe than what's currently there. So this one thing I guess I wanted to highlight, and we've had discussions with some of the residents in this area, but right now the trunk storm sewer basically runs north down Alpine from Clarinda, but it actually cuts over to Arkell through an existing easement, then runs north on Arkell, and then eastward on Henley. So right now that trunk storm sewer, and as well the trunk sanitary sewer that runs parallel to it, is located, there's homes located on either side. So we're not able to replace, due to the proximity of the homes, we're not able to replace the storm sewer in its current location. So what the project includes is realigning that section of trunk storm sewer, continuing it north down Alpine, and then eastward down Henley Street, where it'll kind of rejoin its existing alignment. And since we're doing that with the storm sewer, the trunk storm sewer, we're also going to take the opportunity and realign this section of trunk sanitary sewer. That way, the city will be able to eliminate having these two large pipes running between these homes on Alpine and Henley. Now, again, people familiar with the area will know that the topography is quite steep in the vicinity of the Alpine and Henley intersection. So as a result of this steep topography, or this grade differential, when we're replacing or realigning the trunk storm and sanitary sewers along this section of roadway, the sewers will end up being quite deep. So, as a result of just the size of the pipes and the depth of the sewers that we need to install kind of in this area, we're anticipating that there will need to be a hard closure of Alpine and Henley that would last for the better part of the 2021 construction season. However, access is still going to be available to Carling Avenue via either Tavistock or Connaught. So those will still, while this is closed, those intersections or accesses would remain open. Now we have had separate discussions with residents kind of in this area, but there is the likelihood that the construction work will result in kind of loss of driveway access for an extended period of time. And the contract includes, in this instance, the contract includes provisions for alternate parking as close as we can to people's homes, and includes requirements for the contractor to construct temporary pedestrian access from these parking areas to people's homes so that they can still access their properties. Now, we heard this at the last public information session, is that the sidewalk that runs along the west side of Alpine is a really important pedestrian corridor and kind of gives the community pedestrian access to Carling Avenue. So recognizing the importance of this pedestrian link, there's a requirement for the contractor to install a temporary an asphalt pedestrian walkway along the west side of Alpine around this deep sewer work to keep that north-south pedestrian link operational during construction. Many of you might already be aware that this project will result in a fair bit of impact to some existing trees that are in the neighborhood. So right now we have to replace the trunk storm sewer in its current alignment. There's no opportunity to find a different location within the city's right of way to put it. So right now we have to put the new pipe in basically where the old pipe is. And the existing pipe is located in pretty close proximity to or directly underneath a number of mature trees, and many of them will have to be removed in order to accommodate the trunk storm sewer installation. But the city, we do have as part of the team, a landscape architect who has put together a planting plan to basically replace any trees that are removed, and the trees are being replaced at a ratio of over 2 to 1. So for every tree that's removed, there's at least 2 trees being planted in their place. So one thing that has been included in the contract is, again, these types of construction projects. they do take up some room in terms of the contractor will have materials and equipment and pieces of pipe that'll be on site, and it's always in these local neighborhoods, it's always a bit of a challenge to find space to kind of store and stockpile materials. So the contract does include the option for the contractor to use some of the green space in the vicinity of the Henley and Tavistock intersection. So we kind of have a rough highlight here. Now, again, any trees that are in that area have to be protected, and there's a requirement should the contractor elect to use this area for temporary staging. There's a requirement for them to install fencing between the staging area and the trees. And then, of course, once they're done, everything has to be put back with and reinstated with new topsoil and new sod. Excuse me. So yeah, we have a bit more detail now in terms of what the project schedule is. So right now the project is currently out for tender. So there are contractors in the middle of preparing their bids to undertake the work. And we're expecting that to kind of wrap up in the coming weeks, and expecting to see construction starting in late spring or early summer of 2021. So the overall project will take place over 2.5 years, say. So we'll be starting in 2021 and wrapping up in 2023. So in terms of what to expect, the project's been split up into 2 parts. So part 1, highlighted here in red, part 2, highlighted here in blue. So what we would expect is that part 1 construction would take place in 2021, 2022. Part 2 construction would take place in 2022, 2023. And a little bit more breakdown. So basically so the summer, fall of 2021, we would expect the contractor would be doing, the underground work, the trunk storm sewer installation along part 1, including the realignment of the trunk storm and sanitary sewers that we spoke of kind of in this deep section. We'd be seeing the installation after that work is completed. We'd be seeing the contractor reinstate the area, installing that north sidewalk we spoke of earlier on Henley, reinstating the roadway or any disturbed roadway surfaces back up to base course asphalt. And yeah, so that would be done kind of in advance or completed in advance of winter. So one thing I just wanted to highlight too, I did mention that there would be tree removal. So the contract, we would not be removing trees. We would be removing trees in the same year as the construction of the underground. So what that basically means is, part 2, which wouldn't start until next year, we wouldn't remove the trees this year. So we'd leave the trees in and remove them just in advance of construction next year. So now moving into next year, so the spring, summer, fall of 2022. So what we would have is we'd be wrapping up kind of the finishing work on the part 1 limits. So that means, the contractor would be in there putting the top coat of asphalt on, any outstanding landscaping. And then you would be seeing the underground work taking place on part 2 work. So replacing the trunk storm sewer. And again, by the onset of winter, the contractor would have done that work, reinstated the roadway, and back up to base course asphalt. And then the project would wrap up in the spring, summer of 2023, where the contractor would be returning and completing the top lift of asphalt on the part 2 limits and taking care of any remaining or outstanding landscaping. So these next few slides will kind of run you through a little bit about, what, some typical things or that people can expect. Obviously, this type of work will result in some impacts and some disruption. So we're going to go through a few of these items and just talk about them and kind of some of the mitigation strategies and whatnot. So generally speaking, in terms of traffic, while the contractor is actively working on a given street, we generally expect that section of street would be closed. Now, with people able to circulate around the adjoining streets and detour around kind of the active construction area. Now, again, people, even within the active construction area, though, local access would still be maintained. So that means, people would still be able to, to drive to their homes and get into their driveways and whatnot. Now, I guess that being said, there would be some intermittent temporary limited access to driveways. So as you can expect, as the equipment is digging and installing the sewers, they'll be moving along, and at some point they'll have to move across the bottom of someone's driveway. So in those instances, there may be a loss of access temporarily for a day or a couple of days, just as the construction operation makes its way across someone's driveway. So in those instances, the project team would be reaching out to homeowners in advance, giving them lots of advance warning of what's coming. People would have the option of the city would hand out these temporary orange parking passes that people could display on their windshields, and it just allows them to park on one of the neighboring streets or close by, and where parking's permitted, and not get a ticket. Pedestrian access. Now, again, there's requirements in the contract that the contractor does have to maintain pedestrian access through the project limits. So they'll have to put together a plan on how they plan to do that. And as we've talked about already, there's a requirement to construct a temporary asphalt pathway along the west side of Alpine around the deep sewer work. So to keep that north-south pedestrian link intact. Construction noise. Yes, there will be construction noise. These types of projects, require a certain size of equipment to undertake the work. We do know that in the vicinity of the Alpine and Henley intersection, where some of that deeper sewer work needs to take place, that there is rock. The contractor will have to break apart and excavate rock, so that there'll be some noise impact from that. Now, again, in terms of noise, the contractor is still subject to the provisions of the city's noise bylaw in terms of how loud the noise is, as well as their working hours are all dictated by the city's noise bylaw. Dust, again, with construction taking place in the summer, and it hasn't rained in a little while, there will be some dust generated by the construction activities. So some measures that the contractor has at their disposal to help kind of mitigate dust is they will often apply water, or they'll apply calcium chloride to unpaved surfaces, just to try and limit the amount of dust. And again, the contract includes use of street sweeper trucks. So, those would circulate on a regular basis in kind of some of the surrounding streets and cleaning up any dust or debris that might have from the construction activities that might make its way onto the roadway. Construction-induced vibrations, again, with the size of the equipment that's required to carry out the work, homeowners will feel some vibrations due to the operation of the heavy equipment. Again, it's very common, and it's rarely a cause for any type of concern. What will happen at the onset of the project is one of the very first things the contractor will do is they will carry out what's called an interior exterior pre-construction inspection of homes within the work limits, if the homeowners are in agreement. So what you would expect is that the contractor would distribute notices to everyone's home explaining what, you know, this pre-construction inspection procedure. There's usually a contact on that form that the residents can call to schedule an appointment. This pre-construction survey is carried out by a third party, so they kind of document. The idea is to document the existing conditions of the exterior and interior of the home. Should there ever be a problem, they can kind of refer back to that information. Again, one thing that might happen too is some homeowners may be approached and in terms of requesting consent to install a vibration monitor or vibration monitoring equipment in some homes. And again, that's basically like a seismograph, and it just keeps it just allows the contractor to kind of monitor, you know, vibrations that their construction activities might be generating, just to kind of keep an eye on vibration levels. On-street parking during construction within the active construction area are generally restricted. So the idea there is, you know, you don't want parked cars kind of interfering with the construction operation. Although as construction kind of gets underway, the contractor may still allow some permit parking within the project limits in areas where they're not actively working. And again, you know, on surrounding side streets, not within the project limits, you know, parking would still be available subject to whatever, you know, current parking restrictions are in place on those streets. So brief water interruptions. So in order to accommodate the installation of the trunk storm sewer, there are some sections of water mains and some individual house services that will need to be replaced as a result of installing the trunk storm sewer. So in order to carry out that water main work, there may be some brief interruptions to water supply. Again, generally those are fairly short, maybe several hours, certainly no more than a day. The city's drinking water services would circulate in advance and provide people with notices, so you'd have ample notice, you know, that of any kind of upcoming interruption to the water supply. Again, these are all very, very temporary. There are some individuals that, due to where the water main replacement needs to be a little bit more extensive, and there are some homes that will need to be put onto temporary water services. So that means basically your water, it's still city water, will be delivered to the home via kind of overland hoses rather than the underground pipes. And again, in the process of setting up those temporary water services, there may be some brief water interruptions while homeowners are switched from the current, you know, city supply over to this temporary water system. So where we expect homes to be put on temporary water, it would be kind of the north end of Alpine and the west end of Henley, where we're kind of realigning the trunk storm and sanitary sewers, and at the north end of Arkell Street. Those are the homes that people in those areas would expect to be put on temporary water. So this type, again, trucks will be required to access the site. Again, there's going to be excavated material that's going to need to be removed. There's going to be material that's going to need to be delivered, equipment brought to site. And you know, equipment is going to need to operate in and around to support the active construction operation. So at this point, we don't have the contractor on board yet. So once we do, we'll get a sense from the contractor as to what their truck routes into the neighborhood will be. And again, those could change, as the construction kind of progresses through the neighborhood. Those routes may change over time. So we'll get some more information on that once we get the contractor on board and get a better feel for kind of how they're going to execute the work. Yeah, so that essentially that's the end of the presentation. As mentioned earlier, Kevin Gibbs is the city project manager. So, I know it's a lot of information to take in, and people may think of a question after the fact. And again, Kevin's email is there, so certainly reach out to Kevin, and yeah, we can certainly answer people's questions. It doesn't just have to be something that you think of on the spot right now. And I know some questions did kind of come in advance. So if people are okay, I might just kind of run through some of these right now. I know a question came in about the Alpine sidewalk and whether it would be operational during construction, and yes, it would be. Again, we will have to build a bit of a temporary bypass around the construction, but that north-south corridor will remain active. Timeline for the various stages of construction, we kind of got into that a little bit. So I think until we get the contractor on board and have their more detailed schedule, that's kind of how we see the project kind of unfolding at a fairly high level. Will home storm lines and sanitary lines have to be temporarily capped while the work is being done? No, that's not the case. So people, as the construction progresses, yeah, there's no need for people to kind of worry about using their facilities. So tree replacements, there are some people had some very specific questions about trees and tree plantings on their property. So maybe I won't necessarily maybe get into the homeowner by homeowner basis, but it's certainly one of those things that we can have certainly a discussion one-on-one with homeowners if they want to send an email to Kevin about, some people may have questions about the number of trees or the type of tree being maybe planted in front of their homes, and yeah, we're certainly happy to have a conversation and give people a little bit more information. Some people have maybe want a specific type of tree, and we can certainly have those types of conversations. I think probably better to have those offline, but yeah, certainly reach out to Kevin and yeah, with any types of specific tree related questions or households close to the deep sewer excavation were told that parking would be arranged elsewhere while driveways are inaccessible. So I think that is still the case. So we do have areas identified. Those are in the contract. We have items for the contractor to build those temporary parking facilities. So that's all in place, like we had spoke to with residents in that area before. Again, I don't have, until we get the contractor on board, we won't know the kind of the specifics of kind of that deep sewer work, but it is a lot of work to undertake. So it is something that I think we spoke about that would probably take the better part of this 2021 construction season to complete. I think, yeah, so there was a question too about whether this is maybe getting into more of a kind of a traffic management and type question, but will there be any measures taken to assist residents from entering and exiting the neighborhood on Pinecrest at Kelly, as this will be the only entry and exit point for some? And I guess it's not a signalized intersection, so I believe trying to turn left onto Pinecrest from Kelly would, is probably a challenge at the best of times. One thing I did want to mention is there is a requirement in the contract that the contractor, while they're working on Clarinda, they do have to keep a lane open so that for vehicular traffic. So again, that section of Clarinda kind of acts as kind of the link between, I guess, the west and the east sides of the community. So there is a requirement to keep that a lane open, so people kind of on Moncton would still, have the ability to cross Clarinda in order to kind of access Alpine or Tavistock or Connaught and have access to Carling. And so there's some signalized intersections up there that make it a little bit easier to kind of get out of the community. So I think that's all. Oh, the only other question I think, and this is maybe something for Brittany, was there was a question just related to, again, I think we're going to have Alpine and Henley closed for the better part of the 2021 construction season. So I think there was concern that there may be some increased traffic on Tavistock, and there was concerns about excessive speeding and whatnot and whether any measures were being implemented on Tavistock.
Yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit. That's the concerns are noted. That's something that's already been a pre-existing issue. So some strategic pavement markings were implemented in 2018 to help facilitate that as well. So we will be undertaking some extra data in advance of the construction happening this year, and it is something we'll be monitoring throughout construction. There's a couple other questions in the chat there too, Jason.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Connie,
I have the
Connie,
presentation up and running. I don't know if people can read. Someone can read it to me.
I think Connie, were you going to read out the questions for us?
In the chat?
Yeah. Yes, normally the councillor reads out the questions from the chat, so I'll leave it to her.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay. And you covered off Kathy Vandergrift's question about larger trees in place of the 2-for-1, because there's not enough room for 2-for-1, and bigger trees would be better for the life cycle canopy in the area. Is it possible to use larger trees rather than necessarily the 2-for-1?
Actually, our experience in these matters about replacing with larger, more mature trees is that there's a very high risk of mortality, and you get into the situation where the tree doesn't take, and then you're constantly replacing the tree, and it's a huge cost to the project. And we have a policy at the city for, we have our city forester with the landscape architect from a consultant that reviews the situation, and they're able to establish like an equivalent, value tree, and keeping in mind that we want the tree to take, we want it to be successful, and it's not feasible to replace a mature tree with a mature tree with a canopy. It's just not feasible.
Okay, thank you. And about the need for blasting rock, you touched upon a bit, but how much will be required? This was the question that came up earlier.
Yeah. There's a significant amount of rock. We have a geotechnical study that established the volume of the rock. We have an idea of the density of the rock. It's up to the contractor for the method of excavation. We don't tell the contractor how to remove the rock. It's quite likely that the rock can be removed with just a standard hoe ram or fairly large hoe ram. Actually, not a standard. It's going to be a fairly large hoe ram that breaks the rock. There may be some pre-drilling required where they might drill in some holes to weaken the rock before they break it. Jason, you want to jump in with any other additional information there?
No, Kevin, I think you got it pretty. Yeah, that's kind of fairly typical from, there's nothing that takes, I guess, blasting off the table, but I haven't seen a contractor, blast in an existing residential neighborhood. And again, that rock is in the vicinity of the Alpine and Henley intersection. So there's also, like I said, there's provisions in the contract. So people that live kind of in that immediate vicinity, I think there is a requirement in the contract to have the contractor put vibration monitors in people's homes, just to kind of measure vibration levels from the rock removal work, just to make sure that they're not excessive.
Sheila P. Is asking about what is the work necessary to address water flow out of Elmhurst Woods onto Henley in relation to the construction of the Henley sidewalk. So this is about drainage, and
I know exactly what they're talking about.
yeah, there is a bit of
there's a
downward.
Yeah, anytime I've ever been out there, and I was out there this spring, you've got a steady flow of water coming out of that wooded area, and it runs down and then tops over the curb and then down the street. So while we are doing, actually here, let me see if I can bring another image over. Oops, there we go. I'm just going to load up an image here. So we do, as part of the work on Henley. So I'm just going to zoom in here, and I hope I'll just give it a second so that it can refresh on people's screens. So we'll be putting the sidewalk in on the north side of Henley, and then just in behind that sidewalk, we're just going to have a nice little swale kind of in behind the sidewalk that's going to intercept the water that comes out of the woods. And then we're going to have periodic drainage structures kind of just behind the sidewalk that water can flow into and then get back into the storm sewer system. So that kind of nuisance runoff that you get out of the woods there should be that goes onto the roadway should be eliminated by this project.
Okay, excellent question, Sheila. Thank you. Will there be a requirement for the contractor to control and remove garbage from the site? The prep work left food-related waste that we in the community had to collect and dispose of, especially around the porta potty on Clarinda.
Well, certainly the contractor shouldn't be, they should be keeping their site neat and tidy, and shouldn't be leaving garbage in behind. So I guess that's one of those things that, the city does have an on-site representative that will be kind of keeping an eye on those types of things. And certainly if people in the community notice maybe the contractor falling out of line, they can certainly get in touch with us or get in touch with our on-site representative, and we can have a chat with the contractor staff on site, just to make sure that doesn't happen.
We'll make sure we have their email and stay in contact so that we can stay on top of things. Marcel is asking, how long is the 2021 construction season and when's it expected to be? So when are you starting?
So I think, again, we until we get the contractor on board, we won't know for sure, but my gut feeling, like by the time the city, the paperwork and contracts are signed and there's some documentation that has to take place, and then the contractor has to order material, and there's some startup stuff that they have to do. My feel is that you might be looking towards the end of June, early July, before like the really heavy stuff takes place. And again, typically, by the time we get into end of October, mid-November, things start to get cold, and so things would be wrapping up, we would expect, towards the end of, say, mid-November, that type of thing, so that that we have the road kind of reinstated in advance of winter, and regular plowing operations can take place.
It'll be wrapped up in November.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that section before we talked about the part one, right?
Mhm.
Like at the end of the, I'll just bring my presentation back up. Yeah, so this part, so at the end of 2021, we would expect, like, or before winter of 2021, we would expect that, the contractor would have the pipe in the ground, backfill the hole, rebuild the road, and then pave the first layer of asphalt on the roadway, and along with replacing any curbs and installing that north sidewalk. That's kind of what our expectations are for the end of this construction season.
Okay. All right, thank you. And Leah's asking, the Henley sidewalk, is it going to be directly beside the road, or is there a separation? She couldn't tell from.
Yes, it is. So it's what they would call a monolithic curb and sidewalk. So the curb and sidewalk are kind of all one
Okay.
piece. Yeah.
Okay, great.
It's just like the one on Alpine, I think. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And there'll be some work done on the Alpine sidewalk, reinstating it.
Yes, for sure. That kind of where we're realigning the sewers, we're going to reinstate that back. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a question of what standard you use when you reinstate it. If it's new standards, or if it's going to look the same as before, or.
Well, I think what we would have there is the width of the sidewalk. The new, I guess, accessibility standards require a 1.8 meter wide sidewalk. So if it's not already 1.8, we'd be reinstating that a 1.8 meter wide sidewalk there.
Yeah.
I think it might be closer to 1.5 now. So it would be a little bit wider where we're reinstating it.
Okay.
Just to meet those accessibility standards.
Yeah, yes, no, that's good to know. I appreciate seeing the curb from Henley to Alpine that's jetting out a bit to slow people down, since we've had concerns on Alpine about speeding. So that will be help, the little bulb out. So that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
on the sidewalk. That's great. That's very helpful. I think our next questions may be more towards Phil and anyone else here representing for on traffic, but the questions earlier about we had a resident who has young children on Tavistock, and it sounds like Tavistock is going to get particularly busy, and they're already concerned about issues of people using it as a method to come into the community. So that may not be your bailiwick, but maybe we can hear from Phil or one of the other traffic people on that.
What I suggest, Jason, can you pull up the big picture of the drainage area, or the picture that shows the perimeter arterial streets? One thing to take into consideration, the particular nature of this construction project is that it's inside a community area, a neighborhood, and it's in the center. So the lookout, the access egress of all trucks are going to be from the perimeter streets. So the trucks have to, take local roads to get to the site. So this is a particular nature of this project. But Phil, go jump ahead, jump in, and you could speak to Phil or Brittany.
Yeah, and Brittany, yes, thanks.
Yeah, so thank you, Councillor. And Brittany's here with me. Brittany is the person who looks after all the traffic related issues to construction in the whole city. I know she's been working very closely with the team on
Great.
this project. And so as she mentioned earlier, we are going to be collecting some data on streets, and we can provide you that list. Because we basically, any changes that we make through construction, we want to make sure that we have data to support what the issues are being seen. And so we'll be, like Brittany mentioned, collecting some data on some streets. And if we see there's increased volumes or increased speeds, then we can look at putting some temporary measures in, like it was earlier mentioned about even just the paint on the road, but there's other measures with some posts and things like that to try to create more friction on the road. I mean, the one good thing about this project in terms of the flow of traffic within the community is that we're not closing the street so that everyone's got access from one way. There's still going to be access to get to either Carling or to get to Pinecrest. So we're not expecting to have double the traffic at, say, Pinecrest and Kelly because no one can get through Carling. So we expect that people will take the normal routes for the most part. There may be some adjustments based on the construction of the day, but that's where we'll be able to monitor and see where the issues are and try to address those. So I'm not sure if there's specific questions related to that in particular. I know there's some streets have been highlighted and we're going to collect the data on those streets, but we're Britt and I are happy to answer any other questions folks may have.
Yeah, there's a question from Kathy. Can the city consider any additional measures for pedestrian safety crossing Alpine at Henley? This would be an ideal time to do that.
So in terms of
Maybe a raised intersection or.
So is this during construction or during like when the construction's all done?
After, so that this is an opportunity to install it.
Yeah, so I haven't seen the actual design. I don't know, Kevin, if you can talk to what's being or
Yeah.
what's being
Yes.
Yeah.
is
Thank you, Phil. Yeah. This was brought up in a comment, and transportation planning is currently investigating into the possibility of a PXO, a pedestrian crossing at Alpine and Henley. So they're looking into it. That's a detailed exercise where they look into the pedestrian numbers and the peaks and stuff like that. And it's like we don't put in PXOs everywhere in the city. We put in where the numbers are justify the PXO. So they have a very specific process with evaluation criteria that establishes if a PXO is justified at that location or not. So we have to just go through the process, and I can keep you posted on how that's developing.
Well, that's a bit awkward when there's going to be construction there. So is that going to, I mean, it's just that there's an ideal time here because construction is going on. So, just like this, the fact that we could get the sidewalk in at Henley, this is an ideal time to perhaps raise it a bit, just so that people will slow down. Have a raised crosswalk.
Yeah, they're looking into it, so that's all I can say at the moment. I don't know where it stands. I could follow up, but they're currently looking into the justification of a PXO at that location. During construction, that intersection will be closed, so there will be no problem. It'll be fenced off. People can cross the street, no problem. And Alpine will be closed at Henley.
Okay. Yeah, here's a question. Have you ever considered if you put a crossing, there would be more pedestrians? It's kind of, you're creating an opportunity like chicken and egg situation rather than, measuring it before and after.
There's a very specific process to evaluate the installation of a PXO, and it has to go through its detailed process investigation, and I can't speak to all the details of that. I can just assure you transportation planning is looking into it.
Yeah, well, I would be very interested to see something there because I think this is an opportunity while the construction is going on, just as the Henley sidewalk, it was decided it was worth doing because you're tearing it up anyway. So great opportunity, and I really appreciate it. So this is just a small extension, and because of it's going from one wooded area to the other, it is a popular, and because of that hill there on Alpine, it's a little bit intimidating because people tend to speed up going down hills. So I think I certainly would be in favor of that. In terms of Tavistock right now, is there anything that can be done immediately to look at reducing traffic, get their head around the fact that they shouldn't be using it as a speedway or anything as they're coming into the community?
Hi, Councillor. Chantel and I are going to touch base. We've spoken here in the chat together, so
okay, great.
We're going to take some of that concern offline. But Tavistock has been reviewed already in 2018 by the temporary traffic calming group. They looked at flex stakes that they weren't available, and we can't use speed humps because of the presence of the OC Transpo route. So it has already been reviewed in detail. We are going to collect some additional data in advance of construction so that we can monitor that through construction. But for now, we definitely hear the concerns, and we'll be following up with that to see what we can do.
That'd be great. Yeah, so just keep us in the loop, because we're certainly working. We'd like to sort of see how these things fit in with the whole community. And is there any other things you can add, Brittany, in terms of just the traffic patterns that are going to change in terms of, for example, Kelly? I know I've asked this a bunch of times and the answer was no for a light there. But you know, just in terms of managing anything that is going to be increased volume.
Yeah, so Kelly, I think, is actually going to decrease in volume during that phase 2 construction because the access at Clarinda will be flagged by the contractor. So you'll have to drive through that construction. So you won't see the same volume of traffic coming into the neighborhood or trying to cut through the neighborhood to any of the other homes. It would be the local residents, we'll say west of Clarinda, between Kelly and Clarinda, and they'll have the option of either exiting at Kelly and Pinecrest like they do today, or they can go through the construction zone at Clarinda if they're more comfortable to exit at Carling and Tavistock or Connaught, where there are some signalized intersection accesses. I mean, at this point, again, we're going to collect some extra data at Kelly and Pinecrest. There is a signal just south of Kelly on Pinecrest, which makes it more complicated. But the one good thing about that is it does create some gapping to help with exiting and entering at Kelly. So we hear the concerns again. We're going to follow up with some more data. In the big scheme during construction, we actually expect to see traffic decrease on Kelly at Pinecrest. Just people generally don't like driving through the construction. So that hopefully is one positive thing that comes out of the construction.
Okay, one of the other issues, Brittany, is there will be trucks coming in because it's a construction site. And one of the issues we've had to deal with is trucks for LRT, which we've successfully managed thanks to the Stage 2 LRT team, who did a great job and they put up the signs saying no LRT trucks allowed at all the entries into Queensway Terrace North. But now we're going to have trucks coming in for this project. So it's going to get complicated because, you know, trucks don't have labels on it that I'm going to this project, not that project. I'm just I'm just wondering how that'll be managed in terms of that extra construction traffic.
Yeah, I mean, Jason sort of touched on it a little bit in his presentation. Ultimately, you're right. There will be additional construction traffic through here to facilitate the construction itself. We don't foresee, again, because it's under construction from another contractor, it becomes a much less desirable route for any additional truck traffic to be cutting through. And we've actually included some verbiage in the contract specific to the truck traffic just to highlight the concerns with speeding and making sure that they're traveling slowly. So that's something on this project in particular we're going to be highlighting for the successful bidder.
Okay. Lee is asking, has the additional traffic impacts of the construction of the Connaught sidewalk in 2022 been considered in terms of further limited access to Carling?
I don't understand the question. Can you please repeat it?
Well, there's going to be the construction of the Connaught sidewalk in 2022, and she's asking, will that also be an impact in terms of additional traffic problems? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. It's going to be constructed in 2021. So
yeah. The sidewalk?
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll be constructed this fall, I would anticipate.
Yeah.
And I suspect it will increase pedestrian traffic, but.
Anyway, all right, thank you for that question. Okay, so anyway, you've heard the concerns, and I appreciate, Bridget, your work on just looking at the overall picture of the traffic pattern. That's really helpful. I think there really is a great opportunity to do something on Alpine at Henley for raised crosswalk. We've been dealing with these questions on the other side on Connaught as the sidewalk got put in, and it's been very helpful. We had an incident where someone's dog was killed on Alpine from a rushing traffic, people driving too fast. So we know there's been issues. So really appreciate it. Anyway, so Kathy says thank you for the presentation. And the response on the wood chips. Okay, that's great. Much appreciated. Okay, well, thank you. And of course, for residents, if you have further questions, or your neighbor, or somebody else in the community has further questions, it's not the end of the story. You can still keep asking questions. And finding out information. And we'll keep in touch with the team to get exact timelines, so that it's, when it's ready to go, we'll have it out there. We'll put it in the newsletter, we'll post it, and give you as much information as possible. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming out. Thank you for the presentation. It was very, very helpful. Okay, I hope you guys can get outside, enjoy that beautiful